Modern agriculture has given us the safest, the most affordable, and the most plentiful food supply in the history of our species. But with our global population growing at current rates, some have estimated that we'll have to produce more food in the next 30 years than we have in the entire history of humanity. The biggest threats to face our species are things like climate change, biodiversity loss, and soil loss. But there is one group of people who can save us from that future: farmers. So I'm on a journey into the future of our food. Oh, miracle! Amazing! To witness for myself what the best and brightest minds are doing.
Everybody wants a fix. Well, the fix is nature itself.
To avert this imminent food security crisis.
We need to start to think now in order to solve the problem that we'll have in the future.
I'll question received wisdom. Why not just get rid of the cows? And interrogate how our food supply chains can respond to unparalleled events like the COVID-19 pandemic.
Technology is going to have an extraordinarily large part to play in the food chain, and I'm really excited about it.
Wow, look at this. So here's what I want to know. If we could radically rethink how we treat our land, what we grow, and how we produce it, if we could not just change our food system, but our whole planet for the better. This time, I'm getting right back to ground level, to the source of the food chain. The earth beneath our feet. Over 90% of the food that feeds both humans and animals relies on soil as its foundation. But soil is now under threat like never before. It's estimated that by some measures, up to 40% of agricultural soils are degraded in some way, and that figure is rising. It's the first 5 to 10 inches of soil that contains almost all the precious nutrients. But this topsoil is at the mercy of the elements. Amongst other threats, it can be physically blown away, washed away, or have its nutrients leached away. But some farmers are trying radical new methods, hoping to not only stop the decline, but even reverse the damage.
I'd like to farm with the more focus on what I'm passing on to the next generation and doing it with the attitude that you're doing something good for the land and you're doing something good for yourself and your family.
Oat farmer Jeff Orland is trialing a technique called regenerative agriculture.
I was skeptical at first, but I've seen what it can do and I'm absolutely sold on this type of farming. In just one season, I couldn't believe how much the land changed on the soil structure, the way the crops responded the next season.
So what is regenerative agriculture? The idea is to rehabilitate the ecosystem of a farm, and improving soil health is at its heart. Tilling or turning over the soil is stopped or reduced. Crop rotation is encouraged along with growing diverse protective cover crops. Agricultural chemicals are cut back, and livestock may be introduced. Sections of Jeff's farm were so bad he was unable to grow anything, but that's changing fast.
If I'm getting oats that kind of a quality with less inputs, and okay, the light bulb's gotta go on somewhere.
But before you write this off as some sort of hippy-dippy, exclusively small-scale solution, think again. It has the backing of a global food giant. Aha, Jeff.
Hey, James.
Jeff, good to see you.
Good to see you, James.
Jeff Harmening is the chairman and CEO of General Mills, a $17 billion food company and one of the oldest in the United States.
We are the first company to set globally to set a target. We want to have regenerative agriculture on 1 million acres by 2030. And what we really mean by that is we don't think it's enough to actually sustain the topsoil that we have now. We think that we actually need to regenerate it. And so when we talk about regenerative agriculture, we're talking about agriculture that actually regenerates the soil, that helps sequester carbon, that helps maintain water, and that maintains nutrients in the soil.
And why is that important now?
Well, we have to act now. I mean, the problem is right in front of us. If you think about 90% of the topsoil being degraded over the next 30 years, we need to act now.
General Mills has been providing farmers like Jeff Orland with mentors to help them switch to the new techniques.
Hey, Gabe. How are you? I'm good. And you? Good to see you. Good to see you, too. Beautiful day.
Gabe Brown is one of the pioneers of regenerative agriculture.
You know, in a teaspoonful of healthy soil, there's more microorganisms than there are people on this planet. Think about that, a little teaspoonful. Okay, but how many farmers and ranchers or gardeners think of that?
But Gabe wasn't always a revolutionary. When he first began farming, he relied on conventional techniques on his family's farm.
The years 95 through 98, we lost our entire crop to hail, and then 1 year we lost it to drought. So we had no crop for 4 years, and so I was forced to go down the regenerative path because of some natural disasters. So it wasn't an aha moment. I tell people the good Lord had to slap me in the face 4 times before I realized, hey, I need to do something else.
Now he wants to pass his experience on.
It's amazing that in 2018, this would have been underwater.
Yeah, we were in real trouble here, Gabe. We couldn't grow a healthy crop. My coach recommended we try a full season cover crop.
Cover crops like grasses and clovers, for example, can protect the surface of the soil and add nutrients before the main cash crop gets planted.
This was wonderful. Sloughs weren't overloaded with water, so the crops grew.
That very diverse 14 species cover crop that you grew in 2018 healed the soil enough that now you're able to move water throughout the soil profile. You don't have that water ponding on the soil surface.
We have about 45 oat farmers we're working with, along with experts. We work with those farmers to determine what kind of cover crops they ought to develop. They're the ones who plant them. What we know is that farmers learn best from other farmers.
I feel that farmers are often very unfairly attributed to a significant proportion of climate change. But in a very real sense, the first people to experience the effects of climate change are farmers. So there is a very real incentive to want to change. So it's kind of exciting to see that there's been such good take-up.
It has been far better than we ever thought. They have every reason to want this to work because the climate is changing so much. They see more rain, they see more drought, they see a mixture. They want our soil to be resilient at least as much as we do.
Look how dark this soil is. That's indicative of high carbon soils. So as we want to mitigate climate change, we're taking carbon out of the atmosphere, you are here, moving it down into the soil. That's good for all of us. The goal is we're trying to mimic natural ecosystems. Where in nature do you see an ecosystem without animals, insects, birds? You don't. We've removed them from the landscape in production agriculture today, and so often you hear people say, oh, we need to get the animals off the land. That's the worst thing we can do for our soils, and if it's the worst thing we can do for our soils, then it negatively affects human health as well. What we're finding as we integrate livestock back onto these farms, we're able to take soil health to the next level. You know, everybody wants a fix, so to speak. Well, the fix is nature itself.
Do you think one company can make a difference?
One company, even the size of General Mills, is big enough to make a difference, but it's not big enough to make the difference. What we're planning on is showing the world that this actually can work. So it is just a start, but it's a good start and a big start to prove the theory of the case.
Very often when we talk about sustainability, and profitability, they can always be discussed as if they're at odds with each other. But what I think is fascinating is when large companies are not necessarily just doing it as a marketing exercise. Consumers want it and maybe they're willing to pay for it. But in a very real sense, we've come to a point in the history of our planet where these are investments. If you want to produce wheat in the future, you have to care about the health of soil. Regenerative agriculture techniques might be part of the solution. But there are some areas of the world where the soil is just so damaged that it's effectively been abandoned. Soil is a finite resource. It can take up to 1,000 years to produce just a single inch of topsoil. And in some parts of the planet, it's being degraded at 100 times that rate. But in human history, this wasn't so much of a problem, because if you degraded the soil on one area of land, you could simply move on and bring other areas of land under cultivation for the first time. But as our population continues to grow, and our planet, of course, stays the same size, we simply don't have that luxury anymore. We have to take care of the soil we have. One of the world's worst-hit regions is sub-Saharan Africa, where the soil that could be sustaining crops has been affected on a staggering scale.
In Africa, about 2/3 of our agricultural land is extremely degraded. That means declining agricultural productivity, less income for farmers. It also means that farmers are constantly abandoning areas where productivity is low and moving to virgin lands that can be able to produce more agriculture.
But this is way more than just an African problem. Ibrahim, there you are. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Ibrahim Teao is the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. If there's anyone who can help us understand why land degradation is a global issue, it's you. So could you tell me a little bit more about why that's the case?
Well, according to the latest science, 1 in 4 hectares of ice-free land in the world is severely degraded. And up to 70% of our land has been altered by human activities. Up to 1.2 billion people in the world are directly affected by land degradation. Half of humanity, more than 3 billion people, are indirectly affected or affected in some way by land degradation. So that is a major challenge. We are talking about now.
Is this a problem more in particular areas of the world?
It's a global phenomenon. There is no continent in the world today that is spared. Europe could think that they are less severely affected by land degradation, which is true. But according to the latest science, up to hundreds of millions of hectares of land in Europe will also be affected by 2050. Africa is probably the largest continent in terms of amount of land that is affected by land degradation. But if you go to Asia, because of the size of the population, you have more people in Asia affected by land degradation than anywhere else in the world. So there is no continent in the world that is spared. The good news is that there are solutions. We are still in a situation where we can reverse the situation.
I'm on my way to see for myself one of those potential solutions that could be used the world over. If you look at it from a plane, it's just an oasis of green in a sea of farmland. I'm walking along the boundary line here. That's conventional farmland out there. And directly on the opposite side, you just get enclosed in a tunnel of woodland. But this is farmland as well. In fact, they produce masses of food. The Wolf family were one of the first in the UK to adopt this radically different farming technique called agroforestry. How's it
James,
going?
nice to see you. Welcome to Wakeland. Let me just give these people this ladder.
Yeah, the world's biggest ladder. Second-generation farmers David Wolf and family are continuing the groundbreaking work started here 25 years ago. Tell me about agroforestry. What are we actually looking at here?
So this was set up by my parents in the 1990s as a combination of lines of trees and then crops in between, but the lines of trees are themselves crops. So this is a kind of whole farm system where there's arable, cereal, vegetables growing in between the lines of trees, like you're seeing here, with apples, plums, pears, quinces, nuts, cherries, a whole range of things, all acting sympathetically and symbiotically, restoring the soil. I mean, it's a wonderful system.
Some recent analysis has demonstrated that agroforestry can reduce soil erosion rates by 50% compared to land dedicated to monoculture. One of the first things you notice is the windbreak effect here. If this was a field of wheat that had recently been ploughed, there'd be wind all over the place.
Yeah, we don't really get soil erosion here because it's a very closed system. You don't get wind. We've got trees which are shedding leaves. We've got a vibrant organic ley which has got a clover mix which we plough in periodically. The whole system is designed to improve the soil health. Let's go look at some quinces.
My favourite fruit, and rare to find in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
Tree roots reach down below those of cereals or vegetables, which means you can get better water infiltration and more crops from the same acre. How does yield in this polyculture compare to a conventional system?
It's far more productive. Instead of just getting a wheat crop or an apple crop, we're getting both. Isn't that amazing?
So it mimics, to a certain extent, how natural ecosystems function.
Yep.
So admittedly, what we're looking at today is small scale, but the ideas that are being pioneered right here could have an enormous impact internationally. And that's exactly what's happening in Africa. Regreening Africa is an ambitious EU-funded sub-Saharan project with agroforestry at its heart. They're aiming to help 500,000 households restore 1 million hectares of agricultural land by 2022.
Regreening Africa is a program that is looking at addressing the problems of land degradation. The African continent has got huge areas which are arid and semi-arid. And in those areas, you will see just small, short shrubs that don't seem to grow into trees. And I tell you, there's a very big potential in converting those shrubs or even stumps into trees.
The project is running in 8 countries right across sub-Saharan Africa. Samuel Ondieksana is a smallholder farmer in Ogongo and has been part of the scheme for 3 years.
When I came to my farm was bare. It was deserted, degraded, a lot of soil erosion taking place in my farm. Then I said, no, I must change this farm. The ability is in me. I embraced the issue of planting trees. One of the trees which Regreening Initiative brought for me was the coriander seeds. Coriander has got a lot of uses.
After planting coriander trees on the borders of his farm, Samuel noticed big changes in his soil.
Coriander fixes some nitrogen in the soil. It adds soil fertility. It also helps in soil aeration. It holds the running water. And it provides fodder to my animals. It's quite important for my farm.
There's no question about the role of agroforestry in playing a critical role in the farming system. Trees are made of carbon. So when you cut down a tree and you burn it, you're actually releasing that carbon into the atmosphere. But this is where now tree planting becomes a win-win scenario, because you get more carbon sucked from the atmosphere to form this tree through photosynthesis. So all trees that are growing, they're taking carbon from the atmosphere and converting it into this biomass that they are growing in. Is extremely critical for climate change.
Good morning. How are you? I'm doing well. Yes.
Samuel is now a leading figure in his community, training others in agroforestry and natural regeneration methods to protect the soil.
Ladies and gentlemen, the way I've established this my farm have addressed the issue of soil erosion to the maximum just because of the trees you are seeing here. If you look at my farm, there's a lot of integration. I have 85 grafted mangoes. I have 100 bananas, one bunch of banana, I will sell at 800. When you calculate all this is silent money.
When farmers start reaching out to other farmers to come and engage in terms of how do we make our agricultural systems more productive, more safe, more resilient, that shows that there's a great need, there's hunger for knowledge. I can see a very big sense of hope.
You know, it's so easy to take soil for granted. People will literally call it dirt. But despite every major field of human advancement, we still rely on a 6-inch layer of topsoil and the fact that it rains for all of civilization. So to me, it's so reassuring to find that farmers all over the world are on the case, and often just in the nick of time. Next time, I'm moving from the fields to the city. You know, if you believe the most optimistic visions, a rooftop scene like this would just be completely transformed. As our urban populations soar, can we bring farms closer to home?
We must have less distance between places where we grow and places where we consume.
And learn to grow in a very different way.
It's my belief that this farm is going to change the world.